There are those among us who love not with their hearts alone, but with the entire weight of their soul. For them, love is never simple, never shallow, never without consequence. It is a sacred fire that illuminates and burns all at once. But why is it that those who love the deepest often suffer the most? The answer lies not in the failure of love, but in the nature of the one who loves. The chosen ones, those individuals who walk through life with heightened awareness and sensitivity, experience love not merely as an emotion, but as an existential encounter. Their capacity to feel is far greater than the average person's, and this magnified sensitivity turns love into both a profound blessing and a haunting curse. They do not love with half-hearted gestures or surface-level affections. Their love originates from the deepest layers of the psyche, where emotions are not fleeting but eternal. When they connect with someone, it is as if their soul recognizes something ancient and familiar. The experience of love for them is expansive, all-consuming, and filled with symbolism, making them highly attuned to every gesture, every silence, and every nuance of the other person. This intensity, however, creates a unique vulnerability. A moment of neglect feels like abandonment. A careless word echoes in the chambers of their inner world for days. The joy they feel in love is euphoric, but the pain they endure in love is equally unbearable. Their inner world, richly textured and always active, processes love through a web of meaning and memory, causing even minor emotional shifts to ripple like earthquakes through their being. Their emotional depth does not allow them the comfort of detachment. They feel everything, often more than the person they love, because they internalize not just their own emotions, but also intuitively absorb the unspoken energies of their partner. In relationships, they become the emotional sponge, carrying not only their burdens but those of the other. This heightened emotional state becomes both their gift and their affliction. Love, which brings joy and unity to many, brings to them a deeper suffering, because they engage with it at a level that goes beyond the material or romantic. It touches the very essence of their existence. Their suffering is not a result of weakness, but a reflection of the immense strength it takes to feel everything so fully. The chosen ones carry within them a deep yearning for authenticity that extends into every aspect of their lives, especially love. They are not satisfied with surface-level exchanges or performative affection. For them, love must be real, raw, and deeply connected to the core of who they are. This longing for authenticity comes from an inner awareness that knows what it means to be truly seen, understood, and embraced. Their hearts are not interested in temporary pleasure or illusionary perfection. They crave connection that speaks to the soul and reflects truth in its purest form. Because of this, they find it difficult to stay in relationships that lack depth, even if those relationships appear perfect on the outside. They can sense pretense, emotional avoidance, and false intimacy, and this awareness makes it impossible for them to settle for less than what their soul demands. This constant search for something deeper often leaves them disillusioned, especially in a world where many people fear vulnerability or wear emotional masks to protect themselves. The chosen ones are willing to reveal their own wounds, insecurities, and dreams, hoping the other will do the same. But more often than not, they are met with emotional distance or superficial affection. This mismatch between what they offer and what they receive creates emotional suffering, not because they need more, but because they love from a place of purity and truth that few are prepared to meet. Their relationships often begin with immense potential, but over time they begin to notice the lack of resonance, the absence of mutual emotional courage. This creates a painful awareness that although they are capable of profound love, they may rarely receive it in return. They walk through love with eyes wide open, seeking connection with another soul, yet are often left feeling alone in their emotional depth. The inability to find someone who matches their need for authenticity becomes a silent sorrow they carry, a weight that deepens with each failed attempt to connect in the way their spirit longs for. The chosen ones often find themselves entangled in repeating cycles of emotional pain in love, and this is not mere coincidence, but the reflection of unconscious patterns rooted deep within the psyche. These patterns are shaped by early life experiences, ancestral wounds, and archetypal forces that operate beneath the surface of conscious awareness. Without realizing it, they are drawn toward partners who reflect unresolved parts of themselves, reactivating emotional complexes that are yet to be healed. The people they fall in love with often mirror hidden aspects of their shadow, those parts of the self they have denied, repressed, or left unexplored. This attraction creates an intense pull, a feeling of destiny, yet it often leads to heartbreak, because the connection is built not just on love, but on a psychological need for integration. The chosen ones may find themselves continuously drawn to emotionally unavailable partners, to those who abandon, betray, or manipulate, not because they desire pain, but because their soul is seeking resolution to something much older than the present moment. They enter these relationships with the hope of healing what once was broken, but instead they are met with the repetition of the same emotional script. Love becomes a battlefield where unconscious roles play out. The healer, the savior, the martyr, each offering them the illusion of control while deepening their suffering. These patterns are not easily broken, as they are deeply intertwined with their identity and sense of purpose. Even when they try to walk away, something in them is magnetized back to the familiar emotional chaos, hoping that this time it will end differently. But unless awareness is brought into these hidden dynamics, the pain persists and the cycle continues. What makes it more tragic is their capacity to see potential in others, to believe in transformation and redemption, which keeps them bound to people who repeatedly wound them. Their suffering in love, then, is not simply about incompatibility, but about the soul's attempt to reconcile its inner fractures through the mirror of another. Each heartbreak is not just an end, but a confrontation with the self. For the chosen ones, love is never a passive experience. It is a force that demands inner transformation. Each romantic connection is not just about companionship, but becomes a mirror that reflects their deepest wounds, fears, desires, and unintegrated parts of the self. They do not fall in love lightly, because love instantly begins the alchemical process of change within them. When they meet someone who touches their heart, it is as if the unconscious awakens, bringing to the surface old memories, suppressed emotions, and long-forgotten parts of their inner world. The relationship becomes a stage for inner work, whether they want it or not. Emotional triggers become opportunities for introspection. Conflicts become lessons. Moments of intimacy open gateways to the past. Their love life becomes a series of psychological initiations that push them toward growth, wholeness, and deeper awareness. However, this continuous internal evolution is not easy. It demands emotional labor, patience, reflection, and a willingness to face the uncomfortable truths that most people avoid. They are asked to evolve constantly, to shed outdated beliefs, to question their expectations, and to confront their own projections. If their partner is not equally willing to walk this path of growth, it creates a painful imbalance. They may feel like they are doing the heavy lifting alone, carrying the emotional and spiritual weight of the relationship while the other remains stagnant. This can lead to exhaustion, frustration, and a deep sense of being misunderstood. They may begin to question why love, which is supposed to bring joy, feels like a battlefield of the soul. The suffering does not come from love itself, but from the pressure it places on them to evolve without rest. It is as though love hands them a mirror and says, "Look deeper," again and again, until nothing remains hidden. For the chosen ones, love strips away illusion, comfort, and denial, leaving only the raw truth that transformation requires. And while this journey can be profoundly beautiful, it is also lonely and painful when shared with someone who resists the same depth of change. The chosen ones often carry within them an invisible weight, a deeply rooted fear of abandonment and betrayal that originates not only from personal experience but also from inherited emotional memory and ancestral trauma. This fear does not express itself in obvious ways, but operates quietly beneath the surface, shaping how they love, how they attach, and how they respond to perceived threats of emotional loss. Love, for them, is not just a feeling. It is a commitment of the soul, a merging of hearts that touches the very core of their being. Because they offer themselves so completely in love, the idea of being left or betrayed is not simply about losing someone. It is about losing a part of themselves. Their sense of identity often becomes intertwined with the relationship, and any rupture within it shakes their psychological foundation. Even the smallest signs of distance, disinterest, or secrecy can trigger waves of panic, sorrow, or self-doubt. Their minds may spiral into overthinking, imagining scenarios that feed into the fear that love will be taken away just when it begins to feel safe. What deepens the suffering is their strong intuitive nature. They sense shifts in energy, tone, and presence that others might overlook, and these subtle changes can activate deep emotional alarms. When betrayal does occur, whether emotional or physical, it confirms the wound they've always carried, making it harder to trust in future connections. Even in secure relationships, they may struggle with internal battles, constantly trying to quiet the fear that love will be taken from them without warning. They long for reassurance, not because they are needy, but because they've been shaped by loss in invisible ways. Their fear is not rooted in weakness, but in their capacity to love with such depth that the possibility of loss feels like a soul wound. This vulnerability often creates inner conflict. They want to give themselves fully, but also protect themselves from the pain they feel is always lurking. They love courageously, yet their hearts are always aware of the possibility of being shattered, again and again, without warning or closure. For the chosen ones, love is not a casual experience or a temporary emotional high. It is a spiritual force that calls them into awakening. Love acts as a sacred doorway, opening them to higher realms of consciousness and exposing them to the depths of their soul. It is through love that they begin to dissolve old layers of identity, letting go of egoic masks, illusions of control, and attachments to false security. This process is not romanticized in their experience. It is deeply painful, often filled with confusion, disorientation, and grief. Love becomes the catalyst for their spiritual evolution, not through comfort but through discomfort. It shakes them loose from their comfort zones, forcing them to examine their beliefs, fears, and self-worth. When they fall in love, they are not just entering a relationship with another person. They are entering a contract with transformation. This sacred contract demands truth, presence, surrender, and emotional courage. It asks them to grow beyond their wounds, to meet the other without hiding, and to embrace the unknown. And while the rewards of this kind of love are immense, deep connection, soulful union, and inner expansion. The journey to reach that space is often littered with heartbreak, shadow work, and spiritual solitude. They may find themselves facing patterns they thought were healed, encountering tests of trust, patience, and inner strength. Love will force them to confront their illusions, not only about the other person, but about themselves. It is a stripping away of all that is false. The ego resists this process, clinging to control, certainty, and comfort. But the soul knows that only through this sacred dismantling can true union be born. For the chosen ones, love is both a flame that warms and a fire that burns. It heals, but it also destroys anything that is not aligned with the soul's truth. This process of spiritual unfolding is not one that everyone is prepared to face, and so, even in love, they often walk alone, bearing the intensity of transformation that only they truly understand. The chosen ones often carry within them a vision of ideal love that transcends ordinary expectations. When they fall in love, they don't just see a person as they are in the present. They see the potential, the highest version of that soul, the beauty that lies dormant beneath fear, pain, or ego. This ability to see the unseen is both their gift and their greatest source of suffering. They project this ideal onto their partner, believing not only in who that person is, but who they could become, with love, presence, and healing. They nurture, support, and often sacrifice, in the hope that the other will rise into the version they envision. However, this projection can distort reality. They may ignore red flags, excuse emotional immaturity, or justify harmful behaviors, all because they are attached to the promise of transformation. They fall in love with the light they sense in someone, even when that light is buried under layers of emotional avoidance or destructive habits. Over time, the gap between who the person is and who they were believed to be becomes impossible to ignore. The chosen ones begin to see that they are loving an idea, not a reality. This realization does not come easily. It is painful, disorienting, and often leaves them questioning their own judgment. They feel betrayed not only by the partner, but by their own heart, which convinced them that the love was destined or sacred. They struggle with disappointment, not because the love wasn't real, but because their spirit hoped too much and expected too deeply. Their suffering comes from the collapse of an illusion, the mourning of a future that never came to life. It forces them to confront the painful truth that not everyone is ready to become who they have the potential to be. And while the chosen ones continue to love with deep sincerity, they must also learn to discern between the soul they see and the person standing in front of them, resisting the urge to carry the emotional weight of another's becoming at the expense of their own peace. The chosen ones often live with a deep sense of inner complexity that sets them apart from others, especially when it comes to love. Their emotional world is vast, intricate, and deeply reflective, shaped by layers of introspection, spiritual awareness, and psychological depth. Because of this, their understanding of love goes far beyond conventional norms. They don't just seek affection or partnership, they seek communion, a soul-level resonance that is rarely found. Their expectations are not unrealistic. They are simply aligned with a rare kind of emotional and spiritual maturity. However, this depth often isolates them. In relationships, they long to be seen for who they truly are, not just on the surface, but in the hidden parts of their being. They yearn for a partner who can hold space for their vulnerabilities, who can understand their silence, and who can recognize the meaning behind their words and gestures. But most people are not equipped to meet them in this space. Many operate from conditioned behaviors, unresolved trauma, or fear of intimacy, which makes it difficult to connect with the chosen ones at the level they require. This leads to a painful dynamic. They may be physically close to someone, yet feel profoundly alone. They try to explain themselves, to open their hearts, but are often met with confusion or emotional avoidance. Their inner world begins to feel like a burden they must carry alone, and the love they give so freely becomes something others cannot fully receive. Over time, this isolation breeds quiet sorrow, a feeling of being emotionally exiled. Even in connection, they begin to question whether anyone can truly understand them. And this existential loneliness adds another layer to their suffering. It is not the absence of love that hurts most, but the absence of understanding within love. The chosen ones are not asking for perfection. They are asking for presence, for emotional truth, and for someone to meet them beyond the surface. But because this kind of mutual recognition is so rare, they often walk through love with a sense of spiritual solitude, carrying emotions that remain unspoken and unshared. To be chosen is not to live a life of ease, especially when it comes to love. It is to walk a path where every emotion is magnified, every connection becomes a mirror, and every heartbreak becomes a lesson carved into the soul. The chosen ones do not suffer in love because they are weak or naive. They suffer because they were born to love, with a depth that few can understand, and even fewer can match. Their suffering is not a sign of failure, but of spiritual intensity, of a soul that refuses to settle for illusions. In a world that fears vulnerability and avoids truth, their pain is a testament to their courage. For them, love is not a destination. It is an awakening. And though that awakening often comes through loneliness, loss, and longing, it also brings with it the rarest kind of beauty, a heart that remains open, even after breaking.